Good morning, everyone. My name's Tim. We have some guests here. It's good to see you. Good to see all you old timers as well. And yeah, I think sometimes we start into a book like the book of Ruth, which we're tracking through right now, and I'm going to try to catch you guys up who have not been here a little bit. And we think maybe like when we start the book of Job, what is God doing here? It looks like these are his people. And his love looks really strange right now. That may resonate in your soul right now, like if there's anything going on in your life that you're having a hard time explaining. I think it helps maybe to get our understanding of God's story a little clearer. So I want to ask you to do something here this morning to prepare to hear, kind of as we're rising up out of the darkness in the book of Ruth. I would like for you to contemplate that the Bible says that you are born with a really wicked heart. Jeremiah 17:9 says that your heart is incredibly wicked from birth and that there's nothing good in it whatsoever. And that kind of feels like the beginning of Job and the beginning of Ruth. Like that doesn't feel like very good news. That doesn't feel very loving from a loving God, right? So I would like for you to do this. I would like for you to just close your eyes for about 30 seconds. I would like to, if you can't feel your heartbeat, I would like, well, you might want to call a doctor, but we have a couple of nurses in the room that could probably help out. But I would like for you not to do what you've done your whole life when you get quiet in church, which is to start some kind of thing where you're praying, Father, 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 Father. Anybody get taught to kind of just take off on some, and you Catholics started hailing this and all that, and so don't run off into prayer. That's not what I want you to do. I want you to sense your breath. And what I want you to sense as you sense your breath, and maybe if you can feel your heartbeat, is that is the definition of grace. If it is true that you have a desperately wicked heart and it is sinful against a holy God, and he has declared that is deserving of death, yes? Anybody in the room? Yes. Then your breath in this moment is a gift. Your next heartbeat in this moment is a gift. So I would challenge you to just take 30 seconds, not take off into some kind of, oh, Father, please fix my feet that hurt or something. Just don't run off into strange prayer. Just sense your heartbeat, sense your breath, and understand that things are pretty good. Things are pretty good in this room today. Go ahead. You guys look really peaceful. I almost hate to stop you. Some of you went to sleep, though. I caught you. What I hope you got a sense of there is that God is extremely kind to us. Naomi and Ruth have experienced a lot of heartache. And although they are deserving of death for their rebellion, he often brings life in all kinds of crazy forms. And so what we're going to start to see is that regardless of where you are in your life, what your story is, that you will see some similarities between your life and theirs. But they have tasted the results of God's wrath. And here's what's difficult. We don't even know that they were disobedient. We don't even know that they had to receive the the punishment of this famine that has come against Israel. It's forced them to leave their home country, right? It doesn't say that not only was the whole nation of Israel basically doing what was right in their own eyes, but also this Elimelech and his family, they were right with them, and so they had to leave also. They might have just gotten caught up in God's wrath against the disobedience of man, and so they had to leave. But what we're going to see is this kind pursuit of them, as it looks not so kind. And here's what I want you to see. Today is really about arriving at a point where, regardless of our circumstances, and we've got a variety of circumstances in this room today, we find rest. That's the way this passage is going to start this morning, that Naomi says to Ruth, I'm really interested in you finding rest. That's a really loving thing to tell somebody, right? Like, you haven't had any rest. Your husband has died, and you're having to work yourself to the bone every day just so we can eat, and you really haven't had any rest. But Jesus said this. He said, come to me, all who are labor and are heavily laden, and I will give you, say it, rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Get in a yoke with me. I'm with you. And learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find, say it with me, rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Here's what I think everybody's got misunderstood about the world with Jesus in church, is that yoke is really hard. And the reason is we're trying to take that which should only be given to Jesus and trying to do it ourselves. And so that's really hard. Whereas what Jesus is inviting us to is this kind invitation to let him take all of your burdens, all the yoke of your life, like Naomi and Ruth, and give it to him. This basically says he sits waiting for us to give it to him, but what we know about God from all the story of God is that not only does he offer that I'm here waiting, he also pursues. If you think back into the story a little bit, Naomi was not in any kind of condition to pursue God herself. And God so sweetly brings her Ruth, a new believer, who is her remnant who will get her to her Redeemer today. God is being sweet to you in some way like that, if you can see it. If you can sense it. Ruth has been a remnant for Naomi. In the midst of them having anything but rest in their story. And we're still going to start to see today that they begin to recover from their devastation a bit. And now Naomi, just simply because there has been some food come on her plate, is starting to come out of the darkness a little bit, and she is the one that devises the plan today. But for those of you that haven't been here, let me just recap real quickly. The Israelites are living in the time of the judges, where it says that they all did what was right in their own eyes, and anytime we do what is right in our own eyes instead of what is right in the eyes of God, even the New Testament says God will allow us to do that, but there would be consequence to that disobedience. Well, the consequence here was as there was no food in the land, many people had to leave the land. And so Elimelech takes his family with his wife Naomi and 2 sons into Moab. The 2 sons go against the recommendation of God, not necessarily the judgment of God, and marries Moab women in Moab. Now, what the law said was, according to Adam last week correctly, was that should not bring those wives back into Israel. Because there was a history of if Moab women got infiltrated into the nation of Israel, they would pull away all the men to other gods. But God has a superior law to that one, which is what Adam gave us last week. And that is, we are to love our neighbors ourselves. And sometimes God brings the unwanted neighbor into belief And they now become the leader of the people of God. And Ruth begins to lead, and she says, let's go home. I'll go with you. I will stay with you because I now believe in your God. Because Elimelech died, the sons died, there's no men left, and so we now just have these two women, no money, no food. We have a dead faith in Naomi. Maybe that's you today. And we have a new faith in Ruth. Naomi was broken and done, ready to die. She tries to send her girls back to Moab, to gods that do not exist. So be careful about giving wisdom when you are that broken. And then Ruth, full of the Spirit, rejects that and says, no, we're going on home because you have the one true God. But Naomi was broken and ready to isolate. But God provided her food, a remnant in Ruth, a new believer, to get her to the Redeemer, the kinsman Redeemer. We met him last week. He's a godly man of the means to provide security and safety. You might wrap up those words with refuge. You know, if you survey American women, what would you most like to have for the rest of your life? By far, it's not a man. It is security. If a man can provide that, a kinsman redeemer can provide that, fantastic. But that dominates the survey. So we have two women in desperate need, and they are just like our American women. They would like to have security. And so God brings a kinsman redeemer. God made a way. We have met him. His name is Boaz. If you can see that board over there, you will see Boaz very closely connected to Market Street, which will have a straight look at Jesus. Because you got to be careful here, or you might have somebody teach you this story that you want to be like Boaz. Look at this kinsman redeemer who is sweet and loving, and when he has an opportunity to help a family member as a redeemer as he should, he is godly and he does what a godly man would do. So go be Boaz. You're not going to hear that here. You're going to hear Boaz is not who you want to emulate here. You want to emulate the one who Boaz is pointing to. Because he's hooked into Market Street there, which is pointed at the arch, which represents Jesus. And so you don't want to be like Boaz. You want Jesus, who is our kinsman redeemer. But today we find out that oftentimes when people have an opportunity set before them in God, and the plan doesn't make any sense, it looks pretty gutsy, they just go ahead and do it anyway. And so I ask you to enjoy watching that play out. In the book of Ruth, we're in chapter 3. You're caught up. Then Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, this Moabite woman has attained quite a status here. She's not daughter-in-law, she's daughter. She's family. Should I not seek rest for you? You've been working really hard so we can eat. Should I not seek rest for you? And way beyond the physical rest over the hard labor, it is your soul has been in torment. Let's go find some rest for our soul. That would always be with a redeemer, by the way. That it may be well with you. Is not Boaz, our relative, whose young women you were, see, he is winnowing barley, threshing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Wash, therefore, here's the plan, and anoint yourself. Smell good. Put on your cloak and go down to the threshing floor, but do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. But when he lies down, observe the place where he lies. Then go uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what to do. And Ruth replied, all that you say I will do. Now, I got news. If somebody asked you to walk out that plan, girls, you would go, whoa, wait a minute. But Naomi's kind of sniffed this whole thing out. Boaz has been identified as their kinsman redeemer, and she's ready to roll as matchmaker. We got any matchmakers in here? You always, some of you gals, maybe some of you guys, you see these couple, you see like, oh, here's a gal who could use a man, and oh, there's a cute one. I don't know about all that, but it is I would say that Ruth is excited to see Naomi breathing, like with a purpose, right? Naomi was ready to die. She was ready to cash it in, and now all of a sudden here she is living and forming this rather bizarre plan. But Ruth is assuming that Naomi's faith has been kindled, and she doesn't fight it. Now, last week, Adam told us how faithful Ruth had been in to dig in to the gleaning, the harvesting of the field. But harvest season is over, and so Boaz has taken all of his men and moved them to what's called the threshing floor. This is not an inside place. I need to let you kind of visualize this. It would be like we have these new big pop-up tents, right, that are open air. There would have been something constructed like that where the threshing of the grain could be dry, but it needs to be open on the sides so that the wind can blow through. So as they toss the wheat in the air, the chaff would blow away and we'd have pure grain left at the bottom. So that's what they're doing. They're taking all that has been harvested and getting it down to the good grain. Boaz and his men would have been pouring all kinds of extra hours in to get that done. We got to get the good stuff out of the wheat, and time was crucial. And so this is a really gutsy, unusual plan, because I think maybe in the past you may have read this and thought, well, the threshing floor was maybe an inside room. It was isolated. What I want you to see is that all of Boaz's men would have been sleeping all around where he was, right there somewhere under that tent. So this was not a private engagement. There are dudes all over the place. So she's going to get all cleaned up, perfumed up, and go walking among all these young, passionate men, we might say. Since we're in church, I would describe that another way if you're at my crib. And she says, clean up, Ruth. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a marriage proposal. I don't know if you got that out of that, but that's what's happening here. In this culture where women would have never thought about being that aggressive, that might not, some of you younger guys, that might not seem like a big deal to you, where today's culture, it might be just as quick that a woman would ask a man to marry. That would have been absolutely unheard of, even 50 years ago in this country, but definitely in ancient Israel. And we've probably all heard this preached, and I want to kill this notion today, that there were some sexual improprieties on this night here. The fact that there were probably 50 men within like 30 yards of this open air tent would be a good clue that that's probably not happening. It's just not true. But this threshing floor scene, it's okay just to think it's a little weird. Okay? It's just not normal, because she actually is obedient to everything that Naomi says. She cleans up, she smells good, and she goes in and uncovers Boaz's feet. And the reason she does that is so that he will not miss the fact that she's there. She lays down where when he sets his feet onto the floor, he will step on her, basically. But there's no lack of holiness here. She makes herself attractive, but she's not making herself attractive for the purpose of nefarious reasons. She is full of character. I think we have a spirit-filled believer here, and yet it is okay to let your mind go to that. This is a beautiful, holy love story. Verse 6. So she does exactly what Naomi says. She went down to the threshing floor and did just as her mother-in-law had commanded her. And when Boaz had eaten and drunk and his heart was merry, he went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. Then she came softly. She had to come softly, or she would have woken all the other men up, and uncovered his feet and lay down. And at midnight the man was startled and turned over, and behold, a woman lay at his feet. And he said, "Who are you?" Now there's all kinds of factors at play here, and God, it's okay to see, is orchestrating the whole thing. Ruth had already made an impression on Boaz the day before and for time before. And all of us know this, that when we get a little smitten, if you've ever been in crazy, like can't think about anything else kind of love, that when you lay down to sleep, you're probably thinking about the one you're smitten of when you lay down to sleep. That's where we should be with Jesus. If it's, a member of the opposite sex because you are falling in love for the first time, okay. But I want you to think about this, though, now as he lays down to sleep, just hypothetically, if he was thinking about her before he did, what a moment this had to be to wake up at midnight and there she is in her best gown, smelling good. Somehow he's startled, but somehow God kind of protects that whole scene because in the middle of his being startled, he doesn't wake anybody else up. They're sleeping all around. And because there's people all around, I want you to think about this, just visualize this in your head. The conversation would have been probably whispered. Everything that is said there for a little while, and there's something romantic and there's a real sensual feel to that whispering and all of that, but while it is sensual, it is appropriate. Let me just say this. That is possible with God's people. That is possible with God's people. But sensuality where the Spirit does not exist usually does not land well. But that's not the case here, is there is a much bigger game going on here than this night of romance. See, God would not be excited about this going too fast and there be some kind of sexual activity outside of marriage here because there's a much bigger game going on here than just this night. Marriage. When we see in chapter 4, we'll see children down the road that beget children that land in King David. One of the strongest types and shadows of Jesus, the King. Verse 9. And she answered, probably in a whisper, I am Ruth, your servant. Now, you guys in here may not be real in touch with your emotions like me, but every man's dream might be that if you had been captured by somebody's heart, that they'd show up in the night and smell good and say something like that. And she says, spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer. And all kinds of people get sick because we're kind of a sick culture there, but there's nothing sexual there. Ruth is alluding to Boaz having said that the day before to Naomi. There's a previous conversation. He's quoting scripture about the Redeemer would spread his wings over and provide everything that these women need. Everything that you need as you sit here today so that you might find rest, so that you might find comfort would be provided if you have a Redeemer spread his wings, his covenant wings, his abilities to protect over you. Everybody tracking with this? It's all over the Old Testament. We sing all kinds of hymns about it, that you would be protected in the cleft of the rock, that God would spread his covenant wings over the top of you for protection and safety. Direct prophecy that a Redeemer, that someone would be obligated to help those in need, that there would be a rescuer. Because these women are not out of the woods just because they've received a season of grain to eat. They've actually stayed alive because they had enough food, because God's grace had come upon them, but they are not safe because they have not been rescued. They have not been redeemed. And here she requests in a marriage proposal, spread your wings over your servant, for you, I have recognized you are a Redeemer. Like if you had one prayer to say today, like as you walk up here to take communion, if you are a believer, that's an awesome prayer. Or if you're not a believer, it's an awesome prayer, because what you're doing, you're asking Jesus, who is your ultimate kinsman and redeemer, to spread his wings of protection and rescue over you. By the way, when you take your last breath, you better hope his wings of rescue and protection are over you. What else will protect you from that which awaits? Verse 10. And he said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether rich or poor. He said, I've already seen your character. You don't just chase just any man. You're not in this just in a game to find a man. And here's what we know from that verse is that Boaz is done in by this woman's beauty, by her character, by her loyalty, And he's really done in by her faith, because all of those things are a result that she has run into the one true God and been filled with His Spirit. You remember those days of being done in, guys? You probably ought to, if you're married in the room, you probably ought to reflect on them. You just can't believe this really attractive gal is giving you the time of day. I couldn't. I was batting way out of my league, right? Some of you wonder, how did you end up with her? I honestly couldn't believe a woman of Kelly's stature was interested. Boaz was smitten at this point. I was smitten. And Kelly never even came and laid at my feet at night and threw out a "I am your servant" line. But I was pretty done in from the first glance. Verse 11. And he continues, "Now my daughters, do not fear." Listen to this. He accepts her proposal. "I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman." He not only has had these thoughts himself, there's been talk in town about, man, there's this woman of character. She's beautiful. She's amazing. And he once again just showed amazement over her loyalty. I mean, like, it made no sense for her to stay with Naomi. Sometimes we stick with people, it just doesn't make any sense on a logical basis. You may have all kinds of people telling you shouldn't do that. Her sister was probably saying, "Come on home. Why would you go there with that bitter woman?" And I have to tell you, loyalty is just so attractive. He said, "Your loyalty, Naomi, is nothing compared to this marriage proposal," right? What we're finding out here is that Boaz is a respected, capable man. Ladies, that's what you want. And dudes, if you're not feeling that's you in this room, then you need Jesus. Because that's the only place you find respect and capability. Verse 12. He says, "Now it is true that I am a redeemer." See, God puts a spirit in us that we feel confident. He's not being arrogant right there. He's not saying, "I'm Jesus." He's saying, the God who is has made me such that you are correct to come here because I am capable. In all humility, I am capable. And in this room today, you know what Jesus says to you? He says, Boaz's claim there is nothing. He said, let me tell you who's really capable. It's me. You're setting your eyes on all kinds of things down there on the earth that you think will redeem you. Jesus would say, and it's true, I am a redeemer. And yet we question Jesus' ability to redeem in some areas of our life, right? You can say whatever you want, but oftentimes our actions scream that we go, I don't think Jesus can actually take care of me in that area of life, so I'll take care of it. Anybody who's in conquering addiction, what would I say to that? How's that working out for you? Yeah. But Boaz knows that there's one problem, and this is why this is great storytelling by God. God's arranged this whole story. In any good love story, there's always a potential problem, right? Boaz says, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Boaz says, yep, I will be that guy. I'm in. Super. But he knows there's a big obstacle. He's not the first in line in that family to be the kinsman redeemer. There's another man in this culture, and since Boaz is a godly man, a man of integrity, that must be dealt with properly. He's not going to go, yeah, let's just do this really fast. Forget God's system, forget the whole system of how this is supposed to work. Let's forget the laws, let's forget all which is right, and let's just rush into this. He goes, no, there's another redeemer. And every good love story has a potential other suitor. Kelly had 10 when I met her. There were other suitors, right? Naomi has known about this. In chapter 2, Naomi said, Boaz is one of our redeemers. One. But Boaz will now be aggressive. He'll be assertive. He will be shrewd because he has acknowledged his love for Ruth. He is done in. And besides that, God knows he's going to right that King David came from Jesse, who came from Obed, who came from who? Boaz and Ruth. He knows that's going to be written. Boaz is noble. He's also shrewd. Verse 13. He says, remain tonight. And in the morning, if he will redeem you, good. Let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until the morning. So she lay at his feet until the morning, but arose before one could recognize another. And he said, let it not be known that a woman came to the threshing floor. He wants to protect her integrity. So the scene was handled in correct discretion, even though there was serious romantic heat here. But it might not have been seen that way, isn't it? It's seen in a way of discretion, and so he's protecting her. And therefore, he says, go home before light. But the biggest moment in the book is this. It's going to come up on the screen. He says this, as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Here's what I would say about that. A godly man's promise is not as good as a God promise, but it's pretty close. And this one is extraordinary because it's actually a promise from God to you. If Boaz is a type and a shadow of Jesus, as we consider Jesus, which is the only reason we're here today, we're not here to learn about Boaz and Ruth and get all excited about a romantic love story. We are to hear that Boaz is the type and shadow, the kinsman redeemer, but the actual kinsman redeemer is Jesus. And so Jesus says, in our relationship, I am making this promise. As I live. I find that so ironic that he was killed for our transgressions and yet he was raised again from the dead. And so he would say, as I live, I will redeem you. But then Boaz sends her home with their version of an engagement ring. Verse 15. He said, bring a garment here you're wearing. So he says, come over here and kind of hold out the ends of the garment that you're wearing. And so she held it out, and he measured out 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then she went into the city. Now, I got to tell you, that's pretty country redneck right there. That is straight Booger County. That's the Booger County version of an engagement ring. He puts barley in a dress. But even more than that, Old Testament scholar Barry Webb says this. He says, not only is this a promise of marriage, it's a promise of a child, and it's a promise of a future child redeemer. There's a whole bunch in this like engagement ring kind of confirmation that this thing's going to happen. She is engaged, and so she sprints home with good news. Now I want you to contemplate this. You are beyond engaged. If you're a Christian in the room, you are married to Jesus. You are in full marriage relationship. But I think oftentimes we do exactly what we do as married folks. We're real excited about being engaged. Gals, if you can remember the night you got engaged, if you didn't run home excited, something was wrong. Like if you just dropped off to sleep really quick that night, something was wrong. And so I'm going to assume that everybody, when you got engaged, you sprinted home excited, hard to breathe, and then you told everybody you could find, I'm engaged. That's what she does with Naomi. She sprints home and shows her the barley, and it's expressing, I'm engaged. I'm in. But I think sometimes we are kind of like, we feel really neat about that night, but then 2 years later or 3 years later, we're not quite as excited. And we stop telling people how excited we are to be in this marriage. And I think we kind of do that to Jesus in our marriage with him. I would assume that the night you were redeemed, you had a hard time sleeping. Like the night you went into that marriage engagement with Jesus, that marriage relationship with Jesus, it was so exciting. Couldn't wait to be baptized. Couldn't wait to tell everybody. Your best evangelism is like the first 4 weeks after you're saved because you want to tell everybody, oh my gosh, I've met the one. His name is Jesus. It's incredible. And somehow that begins to dwindle and begins to fade, and we stop having the desire to do that maybe quite so much. But God plus marriage equals gospel here. I've kind of got up on the screen for you because gospel means good news, something we would want to shout, something we want to shout from the mountaintops. And yet we kind of just slide into this mundaneness. The good news is Jesus doesn't divorce us over our mundane marriage. He continues to pursue. He continues to do exactly what we've seen here. I'm still your Redeemer. I'm still here. I still love you. You are mine. You are awesome. I couldn't think any less of you, even though you are in a period of mundaneness in our marriage. Verse 16, she came to her mother-in-law and said, how did you fare, my daughter? And she told her all that the man had done for her, saying, these 6 measures of barley he gave to me, for he said to me, you must not go back empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Shrewd Boaz here goes, I got to take care of mama. For all of you out there, take care of your in-laws. But the emptiness for both of them, listen, the emptiness for both of them is very close to being banished, and they're feeling like it's very close to being banished. She replied, wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. They're wanting to just bubble over. Oh my goodness, we are about to be redeemed. It's like having the lottery ticket in your pocket, but you haven't turned it in yet. I might lose this, but you're still excited. Wait, my daughter, until you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will sell the matter today. Naomi could sense how smitten Boaz was just from hearing Ruth describe this story. Is that not astonishing? He's going like, you're not going to have to wait days here because this dude is in. He is in love with you. Here's what we've just studied. We just studied a quest for a God-given desire. All of you have this desire to rest, to find a place of comfort, to find home. In that home, there would be security and peace. Yes? Anybody? I'm not, yeah, okay. I'm just making sure you're alive. See, this basic desire is kind of this lump in of acceptance, inclusion, provision, future, a life worth living, full of purpose. Those are things that were put in before there was sin. Adam and Eve, before there was sin, those things were in the garden. This idea that I need to be accepted, I need inclusion, I need people, I need provision, I need a future, I need a life worth living, and I need to be full of purpose. Every human searches for those things. The question is, where are you going to search for those things, right? Now, you can search for those things so much that you become neurotic. That's when your mind breaks because you search so much for them and you broke. But I just want you to hear that search is normal. Don't think that search is not a godly thing. That was put into all of us by God. But I want you to hear that 2 things are present here at the end of chapter 3 that are important as we search for that, okay? Here we go. First one. There is striving. We don't work for our salvation, but we work on these important things from our salvation. I love the modeling of community between these 2 women. The most exciting thing to me in the book of Ruth is the community of Ruth and Naomi. Where when one is down, the other one's up. When one is not sure what to do, the other one has the solution. There is a godly team here that models for us that that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't think either one of them in isolation would have ever, listen to me, ever made this happen. That's Americans' problem with the kingdom, is that we want to find it on our own in isolation, and everything about God's design is for us to do it with someone in community. Naomi was frozen with no faith, and Ruth acts as her remnant to get them both toward the Redeemer. Then Naomi wakes up and works to strive to seal the deal. It's her plan. It's actually, I would put it so far as to say this, it's actually Naomi that chooses Boaz. It's God that chooses Boaz, but it's Naomi, the human, that chooses Boaz. It wasn't Ruth. So, just hear this. We tell our Concrete Addiction folks and we tell our DNA folks here at City on a Hill, we tell everybody that we are learning how to walk in discipleship with Jesus to stop working on things, to rest, to trust. Trust Jesus. And then we say, out of that rest and that trust, strive out of your transformation. Get to work in the middle of that transformation. Don't just sit in your transformation. So there's both. If you've ever heard us say, just rest in Jesus, we either didn't complete the message and abused you, or you didn't hear us right. We strive from our salvation, not for our salvation. So many of you were abused because you were told to strive for your salvation. That's spiritual abuse. And a bunch of you are still working from the redemption of being abused like that. Okay? And then the second thing is, there's trust. As we close down chapter 3, we have no idea how this is going to turn out, because there is another, by law, kinsman redeemer other than Boaz, set to be the one who would receive the land that Naomi owns and Ruth as the wife. By law. So this redemption is out of their hands. Here's the good thing about that. There is nothing more that Ruth and Naomi can do. They have strived. Yes? But now they have to trust. The kinsman redeemer now has to go redeem, including our salvation redemption, that picture of trusting God for all that is good. I have to ask you this, like when you lay down and sleep at night, there's a possibility always that you wouldn't wake up, right? Why would you ever go to sleep? How could you go to sleep? Let me tell you why you sleep. You trust that your kinsman redeemer will do what he said he's going to do. You have released all of your eternity because there's nothing you can do about it, right? In a trust that your kinsman redeemer will do what he said. If you have a lost loved one that you are counting on, that you would be able to see again, where is the trust of that? It's in a kinsman redeemer that you can't see, but that you are believing and trusting that he will do what he said he would do. What did he say? He said, I'm the resurrection and the life. No one dies who believe in me, right? As he's raising Lazarus from the dead, he says, I'm superior over life and death, and should you begin to breathe your last tear, if you believed in me, it's just a transition because you're not going to die. And so why would we believe that? Well, there's a history that he has superiority over death. So if you believe in the resurrection, you would say, I'm going to lay down tonight and I'm going to sleep in complete comfort. Because if for some reason my body stops working during the night or somebody comes in and get me, I'm okay. Because my kinsman redeemer has made a promise. And here's the kicker. I believe him. That's a good reason to sleep. But let me just say this to you. Jesus made a whole bunch of other promises to you about what your life looks like between now and when that happens. Hopefully that's a long time from now for all of you, right? But he's made you all kinds of promises besides that about your life now. What do we do here at City on a Hill? We say that life, death, and resurrection of Jesus assures all kinds of things for you before that moment that you're going to trust him as your kinsman redeemer. Your kinsman redeemer has all kinds of protection and security and life for you and joy and peace and all kinds of things that these two are really looking forward to right now. Like our life has been dog doo and now we're going to live is what they're looking forward to here. They're not thinking about death. They've been thinking about death. It's been all around them. They're not thinking about death now. Everybody tracking with this? Your kinsman redeemer wants much more for you than just looking forward to heaven. Can we like get that on the table? Your kinsman redeemer died not just to secure your eternity, but to secure your now. It's going to be better than 6 things of barley in your dress. Naomi was dead in the road. You know what's going to happen in chapter 4? Let me give you a little preview. It's going to happen in chapter 4. She's going to hold a little baby named Obed. Any grandma and grandpas in the room? Like something weird happens. It's going to happen for me in February. I'm looking forward to it. Right? Obed's coming. And he comes. And there's this. And so Naomi, this one who was dead back in the road, wanted to die, couldn't wait to die, all of a sudden is looking at kinsman redeemer stuff here. Everybody tracking with this? There's provision of life now for us. So Ruth, as a new believer here, says, let's go out and seek God. In other words, I believe God has our best interests at heart. In this room today, do you really believe that? That God has your best interest at heart, regardless of what your circumstances look like today? Do you believe that God has your best interest at heart? Isaiah 55:6 says this, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. And our big idea is this, we pursue and rest, trust at the same time, and this satisfaction that we seek. I would wrap up all those concepts that I listed there a while ago as satisfaction can only be found in Christ alone. They can only be found in your kinsman redeemer. It's not Jesus plus a great career. It's not Jesus plus the perfect relationship. My spouse finally getting all this list I've got for them figured out. As smitten as Ruth is here, Boaz jacks something up about 5 weeks later of some kind, right? You didn't get me to the midwife in time when Obed was doing, something went wrong. There's promises, man. Matthew 7:7. By the way, we could do this all day. We could do this all day about promises to you about not only your eternity, but your now, right? Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be open to you. Your kinsman redeemer awaits your desire to see what he has for you today. That will provide full contentment, full satisfaction, full joy, full peace, all of it. The reason you don't feel that today, you're still trusting something other than him to provide that. If you have one smidgen of depression in your body today, it is because you are looking to something other than him for that full contentment, satisfaction. I would call it satisfaction. I mean, that's a high expectancy prayer, right? High expectancy. This weekend, one of our best friends on earth, Abe Meisenberg, was teaching down in Memphis. And he all of a sudden could not speak. It was like he was under satanic attack and he couldn't get words out. He was all choked up, having all kinds of issues. And 3 dudes walked up on the stage and just with high expectancy knocked. Said, in this moment, heal this man from whatever's happening. If there's satanic oppression here, run it out of here in the name of Jesus. Jesus, kinsman redeemer, come and do this. All of a sudden, he was speaking clearly for the whole rest of the next 2 days. And you could say, oh man, that sounds a little mystic, sounds a little hokey. Well, this says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open. God wanted what he was going to say to be said, so it was in his will. And because his faithful people actually said, we trust you, kinsman redeemer, that in this moment, so that this weekend is complete for all these people, that you would heal this man in this moment, and it happened. A bunch of you that question God's ability to do supernatural just went a little chilly on me there. Well, at least receive this. We started with this, let's finish with this. Come, Come to me, all who are labeled. This is Jesus speaking to you, not Tim. And I will give you rest. I will give you contentment. I will give you satisfaction. Not just sleep, not just physical weariness. I will give you every molecule in your body contentment and satisfaction. Promise. But to do that, you have to set aside the things that you think are going to do that. That's called repentance. It's the reason most Americans are not content, is because we have been convinced that there are other invitations that are superior to this one. So my invitation to you today is to lay them down. You can come take communion without laying them down because he still loves you. You do not nullify the forgiveness of the cross if you refuse to lay them down today, but if you would like to be as excited as Ruth running back to Naomi with a marriage proposal, knowing that they're about to be redeemed and excited about marriage, be excited about your marriage to the kinsman redeemer Jesus, and come to him, all who are labor and heavy laden, and he will give you rest. Take his yoke upon you and learn from him, for he is gentle and lowly at heart, and you will find contentment, rest, satisfaction, all of those things for your soul. For Jesus' yoke is easy. The reason you are exhausted is because you are yoking your own life, if you are exhausted in this room. You still get to strive. Have you ever seen an oxen yoke? You still get to be one of the oxen. But Jesus comes along and says, let me be the other one, and I'll do all the heavy pulling. You get to hang out. You get to be part of it. Let me do all the heavy pulling. I don't know about you, but that sounds pretty sweet to me. But some of us in the room feel like we're in a foreign land. We feel like we're in Moab instead of home. Well, we have the greatest kinsman redeemer inviting us home today. Jesus is our Boaz, but he's vastly superior because as Boaz redeemed Naomi and Ruth, Jesus had not come. And you sit here today with your redemption done. As he hung on that cross, as he died, he said, this is finished for my people. All contentment, all satisfaction in this moment is won. The question is, will my people recognize it? Will they trust it? Will they trust that it's finished? Will they trust that it's done? My invitation to you is to finally lay all the rest of this stuff down and trust that it's done. He loves you no matter how you react to that. So receive his love, and let's respond with a meal. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you. Thank you for a beautiful love story, but we thank you that all of our love stories are just reflections of your love for us. May they be pure and full of holiness like that, where you come and in just a proper way of marriage, in a beautiful marriage, you say, here, take all that is mine. Remind these folks that are listening to my voice right now, Father, that when you say it's finished, then all that is Jesus is theirs. Every immeasurable richness of you, all of Jesus' righteousness, all that is Jesus is now indwells believers in this room. It is all theirs. We're the only ones that can slow down the magnificence of that richness. And so I invite you, Father, to move in your people and remind them of such a thing. May it stir their affections for you, and may you feel blessed as we take a holy meal on your account. Amen.